I signed the papers on a Tuesday. I remember because it was raining, one of those gray Seattle mornings where the sky just sits on top of everything and refuses to move. My husband had set the documents on the kitchen island before I'd even had my coffee. A stack of papers, a pen on top, and he was already dressed for work, already checking his phone. "It's just a formality," he said. My attorney drew it up, standard stuff for the refinancing. I looked at the stack. It was thick, maybe 30 pages. I flipped through the first few, dense legal language, terms I didn't understand, paragraphs that seemed to loop back into themselves. "Can I read through it first?" I asked. He laughed. Not a mean laugh. Just the kind of laugh that makes you feel like you're being a little silly. "Babe, it's refinancing. We've been through this 3 times already with the lender. You were there for all the calls." I had been, and I trusted him. So I signed. That was the worst decision I ever made. And I didn't find out for another 4 months. My name is Anna, and at 31, I was married to the kind of man who is very, very good at being charming. My husband. I'll call him by what he is, my ex-husband, was a corporate attorney named Wesley. We met when I was 26 at a fundraiser my mother dragged me to. He was funny and sharp and attentive in a way I wasn't used to. Within a year, we were engaged. Within 2, we were married and living in a 4-bedroom Craftsman in Capitol Hill that my mother had helped us purchase. That detail matters. My mother bought us that house. Not gifted in the vague way people say gifted. She wrote the check. Her name was on the deed alongside mine. She was 62 years old, recently retired from running her own interior design firm for 30 years, and she had worked herself into the kind of financial stability most people only dream about. When Wesley and I got engaged, she sat us both down and said she wanted to help us get a real start. She put in $460,000 as the down payment on a home appraised at just over $1 million. "I'm not giving this to Wesley," she told me privately, the night before closing. "I'm giving it to you. You understand the difference, right?" I told her I did. I didn't protect it the way she meant. Wesley and I had what I would describe, looking back, as a comfortable marriage rather than a warm one. He worked long hours. I worked, too. I was a pediatric occupational therapist at a clinic in Eastlake, and I loved my job. We had dinners with his colleagues, weekends at his brother's place in Bellevue, a vacation every year somewhere warm. From the outside, we looked fine. From the outside, I kept waiting for the closeness I thought marriage was supposed to bring. It didn't come. By year 3, something had shifted in him that I couldn't name. He started staying at the office until 10, 11 at night. He became irritable about small things, the way I loaded the dishwasher, the friends I made plans with, how long I spent on the phone with my mother. I told myself it was stress. He was up for a partner at his firm. I made excuses the way you do when you're not ready to see something clearly. The refinancing conversation started in the spring. Interest rates had dropped, he said. We could lower our monthly payment by almost $600. It made sense. I trusted his expertise. He was an attorney after all. We went through the process, the lender calls, the appraisal, the paperwork. I was on the calls. I thought I understood what was happening. What I didn't understand was that somewhere in that stack of papers I signed on a rainy Tuesday morning, there was a quitclaim deed. I didn't know what a quitclaim deed was then. I do now. It's a document that transfers property ownership from one person to another. When you sign one, you are relinquishing your claim to the property. No compensation required. No court proceeding, just a signature. Mine was on page 17. Wesley had his paralegal notarize it at his own office. The notary was someone he worked with. The document was dated 3 days before the refinancing closing, quietly, conveniently, in a way that looked like part of the process if you didn't know what you were looking at. By the time the refinancing closed, the house was no longer mine. It was Wesley's. Solely. 4 months after I signed those papers, my husband handed me a different set. Divorce papers. He did it on a Sunday evening. I had just gotten back from a walk. He was sitting in the living room with a glass of bourbon, and he handed me a manila envelope without getting up. "I think we both know this isn't working," he said. I stood there in my coat still damp from outside, holding the envelope. I didn't cry. I think I was too stunned to cry. I asked him if there was someone else. He said that wasn't the point. I asked him if there was someone else. He said that wasn't the point. I asked him if we could try counseling. He said he'd already made up his mind. What he did not tell me in that conversation was that I had already signed away my rights to our home. I found out 11 days later when I called my mother. I'd been sleeping in the guest room. Wesley and I were moving through the house like strangers, polite and terrible. I hadn't told many people yet, but I called my mother on a Thursday night, sitting on the edge of the guest bed, and I told her everything. She was quiet through most of it. When I finished, she asked me one question. Anna, did you sign anything unusual in the last few months? Anything you didn't fully read? Something went cold in my stomach. The refinancing, I said. I heard her exhale slowly. I need you to pull up the documents from closing. Tonight. I did. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and the closing folder while my mother stayed on the phone with me. I found page 17. I read it out loud. The silence on the other end lasted a long time. He transferred the house, she said quietly, into his name only. The room felt strange. I read the page again, and there it was, my signature, clean and clear, on a document I had not understood I was signing. Mom. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Is that legal? I don't know yet, she said. But I know who to call. My mother's name is Pamela. She is 62 years old, and she looks like someone who has weathered things and come out structured, not broken. She had her own business for 30 years. She does not panic. She does not raise her voice. But when I showed up at her condo in Belltown the next morning with the closing folder under my arm, I saw something in her face I had not seen in a long time. She was furious. She didn't cry. Neither did I. Not then. We sat at her dining table and went through every page together. She called her attorney, a woman she'd worked with on her business contracts, and arranged an emergency meeting for that afternoon. By the time we walked into that office, my mother had marked up the documents in red ink with her own notes. The attorney, a woman with a calm, precise way of speaking, reviewed the quitclaim deed for a long time. This was notarized at his firm, she asked. Yes, I said. She set the document down. There are some real problems here. The notary has a duty to verify the signer's identity and confirm they're signing voluntarily and with full understanding. If you were misled about what this document was, if you believed you were signing refinancing paperwork and not a property transfer, that's fraud. And notarizing a fraudulent document isn't a small issue. She also pointed out something I hadn't noticed. The deed was dated 3 days before the refinancing closing, but I had signed everything on the same day. Wesley had told me the stack of documents was all related to the refinancing. If the deed was dated differently, that was a significant discrepancy. He dated it backwards, my mother said flatly. It appears so, the attorney said. We filed for an emergency injunction to prevent the property from being sold or transferred while the case was under investigation. The attorney also sent a letter to Wesley's firm, not to Wesley, but to the firm's managing partner, outlining the situation and noting that a member of their staff had notarized a document that appeared to be part of a fraudulent transaction. I won't pretend the next few months were clean or easy. They were not. Wesley hired a very good attorney. There were depositions. There were arguments about what I had understood when I signed, about whether the process was transparent, about whether I had been given adequate time to review. Wesley's attorney tried to argue that I was a college-educated adult who had willingly signed a legal document. My attorney argued that I had been deliberately misled by someone who used his professional expertise to exploit my trust. The hardest part wasn't the legal process. The hardest part was continuing to live in that house. I had moved back into the main bedroom by then. My attorney said it was important to maintain my presence in the property while the case was pending. Wesley had moved out and was staying with a colleague. His mother, who had always been politely cold to me, called twice to tell me I was being vindictive and difficult. I didn't answer the second time. There were nights I would sit in the kitchen with the island where I had signed those papers, and I would feel the weight of my own naivety like a physical thing. I had trusted him. I had trusted him. I had trusted the process. I had signed 30 pages of documents without reading them because a man with a law degree told me it was just a formality. I kept thinking about what my mother had said that very first night we'd ever talked about the house. I'm not giving this to Wesley. I'm giving it to you. I had let it slip through my hands. One of the things that helped me most during that time was my friend Dara. We'd been close since our first year of grad school, and she had always been better than me at seeing people clearly. She came over twice a week, and we would sit on the back porch with coffee, and she would just let me talk. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't give advice I hadn't asked for. She just witnessed it with me. That mattered more than I knew how to say. I also went back to work, which was the best thing I could have done. I had taken 2 weeks off after the divorce papers arrived. When I came back, I had a session with a 7-year-old who was learning to hold a pencil for the first time without frustration, and by the end of the hour, he was writing his own name. I sat in my car afterward, and I cried, not about the house or the marriage, but because that boy had worked so hard and been so proud, and it reminded me that progress is quiet and real and worth something. The legal case resolved 8 months after my mother made that first call. The court found that the quitclaim deed had been executed under fraudulent misrepresentation. The notarization was investigated by the state licensing board. The paralegal who had notarized the document lost her notary commission. Wesley's firm, faced with the possibility of a professional conduct review, reached a private settlement that I cannot discuss in detail. What I can say is that the house was returned to joint title pending the divorce proceedings, and in the final divorce settlement, I retained the property. Wesley walked away with less than he had planned for. His mother called one more time after the settlement was finalized. She said I had destroyed her son's career. I listened to the whole message. Then I deleted it. My mother came over the weekend after everything was settled. She brought groceries and made dinner, her chicken picata, which she only makes for important occasions. We ate at the dining room table, the one she had helped me pick out 2 years earlier. And we didn't talk about the case much. We talked about her garden, about a trip she was thinking about taking, about a new therapist I had started seeing. Before she left, she stood in the doorway and looked around the living room for a moment. "It's yours," she said. Simply. Like that was the whole thing. It was. I still live in the house. I repainted the hallway last spring, a warm terracotta that Wesley would have hated. I have a lemon tree on the back porch that is, against all odds, doing well. My friend Dara comes over most Sundays and we cook something elaborate and only partially successful, and we eat it anyway. I am not going to pretend that I emerge from all of this unchanged. I didn't. I am more careful now with documents, yes, but also with people. I ask more questions. I slow down when something feels too easy to agree to. I have learned the hard way that loving someone is not the same as being safe with them, and that trust without understanding is just hope, with no structure beneath it. What I know now, and what I wish I had understood at 26, at 28, at 31 standing in my coat, in the living room holding a manila envelope, is that paying attention is not suspicious. Reading what you sign is not paranoid. Asking questions is not difficult. It is just honest. And honesty, even when it's inconvenient, is the only thing that actually holds. The house is paid for. The mortgage is in my name alone now, and some mornings when the light comes through the kitchen window and the lemon tree is doing something hopeful on the back porch, I think about that Tuesday it rained, and the stack of papers and the pen placed neatly on top. And I think, I will never sign something I haven't read again. Not for anyone. Not for love. Not for ease. Not ever. I've thought a lot about the version of me who stood at that kitchen island and signed those papers. She wasn't stupid. She wasn't weak. She was someone who had learned, over years, that love means extending trust, and she hadn't yet learned the difference between trust that's earned and trust that's just handed over because it feels easier than asking questions. Wesley knew that about me. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. He didn't manipulate a stranger. He manipulated someone who loved him. He used the specific shape of my faith in him, my belief that a husband wouldn't deceive his wife over something this significant, and he built a plan around it. That's not a mistake or a misunderstanding. That's a choice. And choices like that have consequences, not because the universe is keeping score, but because fraud is fraud, and eventually the paper trail tells the truth even when the person won't. The consequences caught up to him. The notary lost her commission. The firm settled. the house came back to me. None of that happened because I was lucky. It happened because my mother paid attention to something I had overlooked, because a good attorney knew exactly where to look, and because I was willing to stay in that house and fight for what was mine, even when it was uncomfortable and exhausting, and some nights genuinely felt impossible. That's not luck. That's what it looks like when people refuse to be quietly cheated. What I keep coming back to, though, is this. I was not powerless in what happened to me. I don't mean that as self-blame. I mean it as self-blame. I mean it as something harder and more useful than that. I had the ability to read those documents. I had the ability to say, I'd like a day to go through this before I sign. I had the ability to call my own attorney before refinancing on $1 million property. I didn't do any of those things because I trusted someone who had not earned that level of trust. And that distinction between trust that's chosen carefully and trust that's just defaulted to is one I carry with me now, like a compass. Paying attention is a form of self-respect. Reading what you sign, asking what you don't understand, slowing down when someone tells you to hurry. None of that is paranoia. It's just integrity turned inward. It's taking your own interests seriously enough to protect them. My mother modeled that for me my whole life, and I still had to learn it the hard way. That's okay. Some lessons only land when they cost you something real. I'm still in the house. The hallway is terracotta now, and the lemon tree survived another winter. Dara came over last Sunday, and we made a pasta that was technically a disaster and ate every bite. My mother calls on Thursday evenings, and we talk about her garden and my work, and whatever book one of us is reading. The life I have now is quieter than the one I thought I was building. It is also, I think, more honest, more mine. And I will never, not for love, not for ease, not for anyone, sign something I haven't read.